Chapter 1. Thoughtful Jan and Careless Kitty. In passing through thine earthly hours, avoid the thorns and choose the flowers. "Which do you want?" asked Aunt Eleanor cheerfully one summer evening. She entered the room where her niece Mary and her nephew William were playing. "Which do you want? The right hand or the left?" Mary and William saw that Aunt Eleanor held a bouquet of roses in one hand and a bunch of thorns in the other. They quickly made up their minds. They cried out together, "The right hand! The right hand!" They rushed over to look at the lovely roses, just picked from the bush. "I wish that you would always make such wise choices," said Aunt Eleanor. Mary and William loved their Aunt Eleanor. They had good reason, because she was always doing thoughtful things. They understood her way of dealing with them. However cheerful her remarks might be, she always tried to make them useful. No matter how stern she might be, they knew she would be sure to make them smile another time. They knew their aunt well, so they carefully listened to what she said. "We can compare good qualities to flowers," said Aunt Eleanor. "They seem more lovely and desirable to us. Faithfulness and truth are pretty flowers. Faith, hope, and charity would make a lovely bouquet. Love, joy, and peace make a beautiful wreath. Who wouldn't choose them? Who would ever want to be without them? In passing through thine earthly hours, avoid the thorns and choose the flowers." We may truthfully say that bad qualities are like thorns. They have the same characteristics. What is more piercing than envy and slander? What can be sharper than anger, hatred, resentment, and selfishness? What is more painful than bitterness, revenge, fighting? I gathered these roses and cut the thorny sprigs from the black thorn hedge for a reason. I wanted them to lay on the table in front of us while I talked with you. Young people like pictures. They like to have something to look at which will help them understand what they hear. The roses and thorns shall be our pictures. When I speak about terrible things, look at the thorns. When I tell you about lovely things, look at the roses. Do not think what I am planning to tell you is silly. There is a wise saying that goes, "For trifles that we might despise will sometimes help to make us wise." While their aunt was speaking, the young people looked at the bunch of thorns now and then. Aunt Eleanor went on, "It is a lovely thing to have piety. But what is true piety? It is the fear of the Lord. It is a simple, trusting faith in Him who died for sinners. It is a love and a desire to know Him, do His holy will, and magnify His holy name. It is a lovely thing to be humble. James 4 verse 10 says, "Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up." It is a lovely thing to live in harmony and peace with all who are around us. King David says in Psalm 133 verse 1, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." It is also a lovely thing to have a patient, humble, and teachable spirit. The Redeemer says in Matthew 11:28-29, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls." Aunt Eleanor became cheerful. She noticed the young people had been looking at the roses while she was talking. "Oh," she said in a playful mood, "I must keep an eye on my flowers. What an awful thing if you ran away with the roses and left me the ugly thorns." I like lovely things as much as you do, so I'll keep an eye on these roses." Mary and William smelled the roses before sitting down again. Kind-hearted Aunt Eleanor, the children smiling, the roses and the thorns, made quite a charming picture. Aunt Eleanor knew her nephew and niece understood what she had said. She told them some interesting stories that would help them remember the lessons she wished to teach them. Don't choose evil instead of good, or thorns instead of flowers. If I thought, she said playfully, you would listen to a few stories I know, then I would tell you one right now. If you would rather hear about it another time, then I will say no more. Do children ever willingly put off hearing a good story? Aunt Eleanor then proceeded to tell the story of thoughtful Jan and careless Kitty. Though careless hearts will go astray, the wise and thoughtful win their way. When I was a little girl, said Aunt Eleanor, I spent some time in a village with a lady named Mrs. Wyatt. She was a wise woman who took good care of her household. Once in a while she would spend more money than she should have, but everyone spoke well of her. She was the friend of both the rich and the poor. This was much better than being known for only having rich friends. Mrs. Wyatt had 2 servants, Jan and Kate. The people of the village called them Thoughtful Jan and Careless Kitty. Actually, the names were very well earned. Some people consider thoughtlessness to be unimportant, but this is not so. Thoughtlessness brings about more trouble than willful intentions do. There was a neighboring village that held a meeting every year for hiring servants. Jan and Kate wanted very badly to go to this meeting. They went to their mistress to ask for a vacation. It was Kate's idea, and she persuaded Jan to join her. Mrs. Wyatt knew her servants weren't looking for other jobs at the meeting. She looked very stern when they asked her permission to go. She knew it had got very wild in recent years. People gathered there from all parts of the country. Foolishness and sin were common happenings there. This is what Mrs. Wyatt said to her servants. If you wanted this vacation to see your friends, you would have gone without saying a word. I see that is not the case. I will not forbid you to go, but I will warn you against it. It could rain today. That would spoil your clothes. If the weather is nice, a thoughtless mob will be at the meeting. You may find bad people and spend all your money. You'll hurt your reputation and be bitterly sorry for your foolishness. I advise you not to go. Kate quickly replied, The sky is clear, and I'm sure there will be no rain. My brother will be there to protect us, and we don't plan to stay out very late. They were in such a hurry to go, the mistress finally gave them permission, in spite of her better judgment. Kitty wore her pink dress and bonnet with blue ribbons. Jan dressed more plainly. Kitty talked very fast. Jan was more thoughtful as she walked on. They passed the village courthouse, the blacksmith shop, the White House on the hill, and the post office. Then they came to the hollow oak in the green lane. Jan stood still. Looking more thoughtful than ever, she told Kate she would go no further. While you have been talking, Kitty, she said, I have been thinking. Mrs. Wyatt's words have been ringing in my ears. She has been a good mistress. We were wrong to ignore her advice. Believe me, this meeting will bring no good. It's not too late to go back. Go back if you want, replied thoughtless Kitty. I am going on. I won't get dressed up and go halfway to the meeting, only to turn back and get laughed at. If I have to go by myself, then I will. It is better to get laughed at for doing right than for doing wrong, said Jan meekly. Anyway, look at the cloudy sky. Mrs. Wyatt was right about the rain. Please come back with me. If you don't, I will go by myself." "Have a nice walk, then," said thoughtless Kitty. She continued on her way and left Jan standing under the branches of the hollow oak. Jan waited until Kitty had gone through the gate toward the gravel pit. When she was out of sight, Jan went back. She had hoped that her friend might change her mind. It is usually dangerous to pause even a moment when temptation occurs. However, Jan's habit of thoughtfulness often corrected a wrong step after taking it. This is what happened this time. During her walk with Kitty, she had thought about every sentence Mrs. Wyatt said. Her good sense told her what to do. At one time, it would have been hard to say if she would go on or go back. The scales of obedience and curiosity were so lightly balanced that the weight of a feather would have tipped them. That very morning was the turning point. Jan had humbly prayed on her knees that she might be kept from sin and sorrow. Thoughtless Kitty had not prayed. "Why, what is this?" asked Mrs. Wyatt, going into the kitchen. Jan had been back for half an hour. The rain was pattering against the window. "I thought you went to the meeting in your finest clothes. Here you are in your working dress, as busy as ever. What happened?" Jan then told her mistress that she had thought about her advice. She decided to follow the advice and return home. She couldn't persuade Kitty to do the same. It was quite obvious that Jan's actions pleased Mrs. Wyatt very much. At the time, however, the mistress only said that Jan had acted wisely. Say what you want about pleasure. The inner peace we feel when we diligently do what is right is worth it all. Jan felt the same way. Never before had she felt as satisfied in doing her household work as that morning. Her step was lively and her heart was cheerful. While Jan was doing well, what were things like for thoughtless Kitty? Was her heart happy while she was taking her vacation? You shall hear. When she was by herself, Kate began to feel angry with Jan. Then the rain didn't help her temper at all. After telling the mistress it wouldn't rain, she didn't bring her umbrella. She tucked her pink gown up away from the mud and tied her handkerchief over her bonnet. The wind was strong and the rain came down fast. She was completely soaked before she arrived at the village. To add to her troubles, her brother was not at the meeting after all. Poor Kitty was not to be envied by any means. She was soon in the middle of a careless mob of people. She became friends with a girl who lost her job because of her dishonesty. She had nothing but unfortunate accidents as she hurried along from one place to another. While pressing through the crowd, a chimney sweep with sooty clothes bumped against her wet pink gown. It made a terrible mess. In a wild beast show, a monkey snatched her bonnet off. He tore it before someone could get it back. The entire meeting was full of confusion. Near the end, she found that someone had stolen her money and sewing case. Kitty finally left the meeting, her sooty gown pinned up and her bonnet pinned together. On her return home, she was terribly embarrassed to meet several ladies who knew both her and her mistress. She knew by the way they looked that they did not approve. It would be useless for her ever to ask them for a job in the future. The next day, Mrs. Wyatt gave Jan a nice book. She praised her wise decision and told the girl that she had gained much respect in her eyes. Even though she spoke kindly to Kitty and gently corrected her mistakes, she was cold and distant. Kitty felt disgraced and that her vacation had cost her a great deal. Now, my dear Mary and William, do you see the difference between good and bad conduct? Jan's wise thinking not only gained a reward, but she also gained respect from her mistress. she enjoyed an inner feeling of satisfaction. Kitty, by her thoughtlessness, fell into disgrace. She lost her money and sewing case. She hurt her reputation and formed a bad friendship which might lead her into greater evil. Be thoughtful, wise, and pray. You may be kept from sin and sorrow. Some people think Mrs. Wyatt was right to permit her servants to do as they pleased. Others say she was wrong to allow them to make their own choices. Whichever of these opinions is right, I am not wrong in saying that careless Kitty chose the thorns. Thoughtful Jan chose the roses. After their aunt's story, William and Mary talked about what she told them. When the next evening came, they were quite ready to hear another story. The roses and thorns were still on the table in front of them. The roses, which had been put in water, were almost as fresh as ever.